You are a boring woman, Evelyn. I am divorcing you and I want you out of my apartment by tomorrow. My husband, Marcus, yelled these words into the microphone at our 20th wedding anniversary party. His mother and his young mistress, Chloe, smiled at me from the crowd, but Marcus didn't know I had a secret. Welcome to Nunny Stories. I am so happy to have you here tonight. Before we go any further, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with me through the entire story. Every single word of it matters. And when it's over, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done in this situation? Now, let's get back to my story. It all started about 5 months ago, but the truth is, the seeds of my pain were planted much, much earlier than that. Marcus and I had been married for 20 years. 20 years? Say that out loud, 20 years. That's not just a number. That's holidays and hospital visits. That's thousands of meals cooked, thousands of shirts ironed, thousands of quiet evenings spent sitting side by side, believing you were building something that would last forever. We lived in a beautiful, big apartment in Boston. And here's the thing most people didn't know, that apartment was mine. My parents had given it to me before Marcus and I ever got married. It was my family's gift, a place where I would always be safe, always have a roof, no matter what life threw at me. And oh, how I loved that apartment. I loved the light that came in through the tall windows in the morning. I loved the creaky floorboard near the kitchen that only I knew how to step over. I loved what I thought our life was inside those walls because I was a good wife. I don't say that to boast, I say it because it's the truth, and for a long time, nobody else was going to say it for me. I worked hard, I cared for our home like it was a living thing. I supported Marcus in everything, his job, his moods, his ambitions. I cooked his meals. I listened to his problems, even when mine went unheard. I made sure he always had a clean shirt hanging in the closet and a warm plate waiting on the table. I believed in us. I believed in our future, in our shared dreams. I believed our love was strong, like a great old oak tree, the kind with roots so deep that no storm could ever pull it down. Oh, how wrong I was. In the beginning, Marcus was everything I ever wanted. He had this charm about him, the kind that makes you feel like you're the only person in the room. He was funny, warm, full of life. He used to bring me flowers for no reason at all, not because it was Valentine's Day or my birthday, just because. These reminded me of you, he'd say, holding out a handful of wildflowers he'd grabbed from a street vendor on his way home, and I'd melt every single time. He used to hold my hand everywhere we went, even on boring errands, walking to the grocery store, standing in line at the bank. His hand would find mine and he'd squeeze it like he was saying, I'm right here, I'm not going anywhere. He would tell me how lucky he was to have me, how I was the best thing that ever happened to him. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? My parents loved him. My friends loved him. Everyone said we were the perfect couple. We had a comfortable life. Marcus had a good job and I managed our home, picking up freelance work here and there. We always talked about traveling more after he retired, seeing the world together, just the two of us. I even kept a little notebook. A small leather-bound thing I'd picked up at a bookshop years ago. I filled it with places we'd go someday. Paris, Santorini, the cliffs of Ireland. Page after page of dreams, written in my own hopeful handwriting. I still have that notebook. It sits in a drawer now, full of dreams that died a very slow, very painful death. But slowly, and I mean slowly, the way a crack creeps across a ceiling before the whole thing caves in, things started to change. It was like a hairline fracture appearing in a perfect piece of glass. At first, you don't even see it. You tell yourself it's nothing. Then one day, you realize the whole thing is about to shatter. Marcus became distant. He started spending more and more time at work, or so he said. He'd come home late, sometimes past midnight, smelling of a perfume that wasn't mine, a sweet floral scent that clung to his collar like a fingerprint. He stopped holding my hand. He stopped looking at me the way he used to, like I mattered. When I tried to talk to him about it, he'd shut me down. You're being dramatic, Evelyn. You're too emotional. There's nothing wrong, it's all in your head. He'd wave his hand like he was swatting away a fly, and I'd stand there, feeling like I was losing my mind for daring to trust my own instincts. And his mother, Beatrice, she didn't help, she never helped. That woman had been cold toward me since the day Marcus first brought me home. She had a way of delivering cruelty with a smile, the kind of smile that looks polite to everyone else but cuts you right down to the bone. Evelyn, your cooking is lovely, but Marcus always did prefer my roast beef. Or, are you sure you ironed that shirt properly, dear? Marcus needs to look sharp at work. First impressions matter. Little cuts, tiny, precise little cuts, delivered over Sunday dinners and holiday visits, always with that same tight-lipped smile. And I just took it, I smiled back, I kept the peace. I never wanted to cause trouble. I just wanted my husband to be happy and for our family to feel like a family. I believed in compromise, in patience, in understanding. I believed that love, real love, could survive anything. I was so wrong. Then, about 6 months ago, the crack didn't just grow, it broke wide open. It was a Tuesday night, around 2 in the morning. The kind of hour when the whole world feels like it's asleep and the darkness outside your window is thick enough to touch. I was fast asleep next to Marcus. Deep asleep, the kind of sleep where your body finally lets go of everything it carried during the day. And then, I heard something, a whisper, soft, barely there, not loud enough to jolt me awake, but just enough to pull me out of that deep, heavy place. I opened my eyes, still groggy, still half dreaming, and I saw Marcus. He was on his side of the bed, turned away from me, his phone pressed against his ear. He had his hand cupped around the receiver, trying to muffle his voice. Like a man who knows he's doing something he shouldn't be doing. But in the silence of 2 a.m., when the world holds its breath, You can hear everything, and I heard it, pieces, fragments, enough. Beatrice, yes, everything is going according to plan. Just a little more time. She won't suspect a thing. The apartment, it will be Chloe's soon. My blood ran cold, not warm, not hot with anger, cold, ice water cold. The kind of cold that starts at the base of your spine and spreads outward until your fingertips go numb. Beatrice, Chloe, the apartment, what plan? What was he talking about? I didn't move, I didn't breathe. I lay there perfectly still, forcing my breathing to stay slow and steady, my eyes barely open, just enough to watch his silhouette in the dark. He whispered for another 5 minutes, 5 of the longest minutes of my life, then he hung up, placed the phone back on his nightstand, and slowly rolled over. Within moments, his breathing deepened. He was asleep just like that, easy, peaceful, like a man with a perfectly clear conscience. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, not a single second. My mind was a war zone, thoughts crashing into each other, questions piling up faster than I could process them. My stomach churned with a sickening mix of fear and confusion, the kind that makes you feel like the ground beneath you has just disappeared. I lay there staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows shift as the hours crawled by, and I felt something inside me begin to change, something deep, something permanent. The next morning I woke up I got up because I never actually slept, feeling tired and heavy. Like someone had filled my bones with sand. Marcus was already up. Getting ready for work like it was any other day. He was humming a little tune, as he stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. He looked at me, gave me a quick, dry kiss on the cheek, the kind of kiss you give a piece of furniture. "See you tonight, Evelyn," he said, and then he was gone, and I stood there in the hallway alone, his whispered words still ringing in my ears like a siren. The apartment, it will be Chloe's soon. This apartment, my apartment, the one my parents gave me. The only place in the world that had ever truly felt like mine. The fear sat in my stomach like a cold, heavy stone, but beneath it, underneath the shock, underneath the disbelief, I felt something else beginning to stir. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time. I knew deep down in that quiet place where the truth always lives that something was terribly, horribly wrong, and I knew I had to find out exactly what. I waited until Marcus had been gone for about an hour, just to be safe. Just to make sure he wouldn't double back for something he forgot, a wallet, a folder, some excuse to walk back through that door. My hands were shaking as I walked to his side of the bed. His phone was right there on the nightstand, right where he'd left it. Marcus was never very careful with technology. He wasn't the type to set passwords or lock screens. He always said he had nothing to hide. The irony of that almost made me laugh. Almost, I picked up the phone. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. My fingers fumbled, clumsy with adrenaline. I pressed the home button, no password, no lock, just a bright screen wide open like a door left carelessly ajar. I went straight to his messages. There were hundreds, mostly work emails, group chats with colleagues, the usual noise. But then I found it, a conversation thread I'd never seen before. It was labeled simply, Chloe Boston. My breath caught in my throat, Chloe. The name from the phone call, the name he'd whispered in the dark like a prayer. I started scrolling, and with every message I read, something inside me broke a little more. Pet names, love declarations, plans to meet at hotels I'd never heard of. "Can't wait to see you, my love. You make me feel alive again." And then the one that drove the knife deepest. "You're so much better than my old, boring wife." Old, boring wife. Each word was a dagger, not a quick, clean wound, no. These were slow, twisting stabs that buried themselves into the softest parts of me. I saw pictures, too. Pictures of a young woman, maybe 28, maybe younger. She had bright eyes and a wide, confident smile. She was beautiful in that effortless, vibrant way that youth gives you before you've had the chance to be worn down by life. She was wearing expensive jewelry in several of the photos, pieces I had never seen before. Necklaces, bracelets, earrings that glittered like promises. And suddenly, Marcus's recent little gifts to me made perfect sense. A new scarf here, a box of chocolates there. Small things, almost absent-minded like afterthoughts. They weren't gifts of love, they were guilt offerings, bribes, distractions to keep the boring wife from looking too closely. Then I found the messages with Beatrice. Oh, Beatrice, my mother-in-law. The woman I had spent 20 years trying to please, 20 years biting my tongue, 20 years smiling through her backhanded compliments and her cold little digs. Her messages were worse than Chloe's, far worse, because Chloe was a stranger, but Beatrice was supposed to be family. That Evelyn will never know what hit her. The apartment will be perfect for Chloe, Marcus. It's time that old witch moved on. The lawyer says we can finalize everything after the anniversary party. It will be the perfect humiliation. My vision blurred. The screen swam in front of me, the words dissolving into a watery mess. Humiliation, an old witch. These were the words of a woman I had served tea to, cooked holiday dinners for, driven to doctor's appointments, called on her birthday every single year for 20 years. And the apartment, my apartment, they were planning to take it from me. To throw me out of my own home and hand it over to his 28-year-old mistress like a gift-wrapped present. The betrayal wasn't just deep, it was complete, total. Like discovering that the ground you've been standing on your entire life was never solid. It was just a thin sheet of ice over a bottomless lake, and it had been cracking beneath your feet for years. But here's the thing, I didn't cry. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. My body ached to collapse, to curl up on that bedroom floor and sob until there was nothing left. But the tears wouldn't come. It was like my body had decided before my mind even caught up that crying was not what this moment called for. Instead, something else settled into my chest, something cold, something hard, something still. It wasn't the kind of anger that makes you scream or throw things. It wasn't hot, it wasn't loud. It was a quiet, dangerous anger, the kind that sits low in your belly like a stone and doesn't move. The anger of a woman who has been pushed too far, who has been taken for granted for too long, who has finally seen the truth with clear, unblinking eyes. I felt foolish, naive. How could I have been so blind? All those signs, the distant looks, the late nights, the perfume on his collar, the way he flinched when his phone buzzed, they all made sense now. They weren't the signs of a man falling out of love. They were the signs of a plan, a cold, calculated, malicious plan to use me, drain me, and then throw me away like I was nothing. And in that moment, standing in my own bedroom, holding my husband's phone full of lies, I made a decision. I would not be their victim. I would not cry. I would not beg. I would not scream or throw things or give them the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. I would stay calm. I would use my head. And I would fight back, quietly, strategically, and devastatingly. I would make them regret every secret message, every cruel word, every whispered phone call in the dark. I copied everything, every message, every photo, every text between Marcus and Chloe, every venomous exchange between Marcus and Beatrice. I saved it all to a hidden folder on my own phone. I wanted proof, solid, undeniable, irrefutable proof. And then I put his phone back on the nightstand, exactly where I found it. I smoothed the sheets on his side of the bed, and I walked into the kitchen to make breakfast, my hands steady, my face calm. The war had begun, and they had no idea. The very next day I called a property lawyer. I didn't tell Marcus, of course. I told him I was meeting an old friend for lunch, something so ordinary he wouldn't think twice about it. I sat in that lawyer's office with my heart still heavy but my mind sharp, focused, alert. I explained everything, how my parents had gifted me the Boston apartment years before I ever married Marcus. I brought all the original documents, the deed, the transfer papers, everything my father had carefully organized in a manila folder I'd kept in the back of my closet for 2 decades. The lawyer, a kind, sharp-eyed woman named Ms. Davies, looked through the documents carefully. She took her time. She read every line, every signature, every date, and then she looked up at me and she smiled. Not a pitying smile, not a sympathetic one, a reassuring one. "Evelyn," she said, "this apartment is 100% yours. Marcus has no legal right to it whatsoever, not a single right. It's legally your property, gifted solely to you before the marriage. He cannot kick you out. If anything," she paused, her eyes steady on mine, "he would be the one to leave." A wave of relief crashed over me, the kind that makes your knees weak and your eyes sting. But it was mixed with something stronger, something fiercer. Resolve. They thought they could take my home. They thought they could leave me on the street with nothing. They thought they could hand my apartment, my parents' gift, to a 28-year-old woman who called me the old witch. Not anymore, not ever. This was my first victory. A small one, quiet, private, but it lit a fire inside me that I hadn't felt in years. I walked out of that lawyer's office standing a little taller, breathing a little deeper. I could feel my strength, the strength I thought Marcus had stripped away from me, slowly, quietly coming back. Then, just a few weeks later, something happened that I still have trouble believing, even now. Something that felt less like coincidence and more like the universe itself reaching down and putting a weapon in my hand. I received a phone call from an attorney's office I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was professional, measured. He told me that my uncle, my mother's brother, had passed away peacefully in his sleep. I hadn't seen my uncle in many years. He lived a quiet life, kept to himself, never made a fuss about anything. He was a gentle, private man, a bit of a recluse, honestly. I felt a pang of sadness hearing the news. The kind of sadness that comes with realizing you should have called more, visited more, tried more. But then the lawyer told me something that made the floor tilt beneath my feet. My uncle had left me an inheritance, a massive inheritance, $4 million in a Swiss bank account, and as if that weren't enough to make my head spin, a luxury beach house in Malibu, California, a stunning sun-drenched house with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific Ocean, a private pool, and enough space for an art gallery, which, as it happened, had always been my quiet, secret dream. The one I never told Marcus about because I knew he'd laugh. I sat there in stunned silence, the phone still pressed to my ear, my mind trying and failing to process what I'd just heard. $4 million, a beach house in Malibu? This wasn't my life, this was a movie. This was something that happened to other people, but it was my life, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt, with a certainty that settled into my bones like sunlight, that this was a sign. A sign that I was meant for bigger and better things than the small, cruel, suffocating life Marcus and Beatrice had planned for me. I also knew instantly and absolutely that Marcus could never find out. If he caught even a whisper of this, he would come at me with everything he had. His greed would swallow whatever was left of his decency. He would try to claim it, manipulate it, steal it. I knew him. I knew him better than he knew himself. So this became my secret, my ace, my trump card. I hired a separate set of lawyers, completely independent from Ms. Davies, to handle the inheritance. I made sure everything was airtight, locked behind layers of legal protection, completely invisible to Marcus. I didn't even tell my closest friends, not yet. This was my power, and I was going to wield it at exactly the right moment. Life at home became a strange, silent dance. On the surface, nothing changed. I cooked dinner. I set the table. I asked Marcus about his day with the same quiet smile I'd worn for 20 years. "How was work, dear? Would you like more coffee? Your blue tie looks nice today." But inside, I was a completely different person. I was watching, observing every glance, cataloging every lie, noting every cold, careless word. I had become a detective in my own home, and my husband was the case. Marcus, meanwhile, grew bolder. He stopped even pretending to be careful. He started spending more nights out, sometimes not coming home until well past midnight, sometimes not coming home at all. He bought expensive gifts, and I knew exactly who they were for. New watches, designer clothes, dinners at restaurants we'd never been to together. He even started pulling money from our joint savings account. Small amounts at first, a few hundred here, 1,000 there. Then larger, bolder, like a man who believes he'll never get caught. I didn't say a word, not one word. I just watched, and in a small journal, a plain, unassuming notebook I kept hidden in the back of my underwear drawer, I wrote down everything. Every dollar he withdrew, every late night, every suspicious phone call taken in another room with the door closed. Dates, times, amounts. My calm exterior was a mask, and behind it, a storm of planning and calculation was gathering strength. Beatrice started coming around more often, too. She'd show up unannounced, settling into my kitchen like she owned the place, her eyes sweeping over everything with quiet disapproval. She'd find ways to pick at me, subtle, surgical little comments designed to chip away at whatever confidence I had left. "Evelyn, you're not getting any younger, you know. You really should take better care of yourself. Marcus appreciates a woman who looks sharp. Have you thought about changing your hairstyle? Something a little more modern, a little more exciting?" I just smiled. I let her words wash over me like rain on a window, present, visible, but unable to touch what was inside. I knew her game now. She wanted to see me crack. She wanted me to snap, to cry, to lose my composure so she could point at me and say, see how unstable she is? But I wouldn't give her that, not anymore. "Thank you for the advice, Beatrice," I'd say, my voice warm, my smile easy. And then I'd turn back to whatever I was doing, chopping vegetables, folding laundry, while she sat there, confused, unable to understand why her barbs weren't landing. Her words, which once would have kept me up at night, now felt hollow, empty. Because I knew something she didn't. I knew their plans, every ugly detail, and soon, very soon, they would know mine. The days crawled by, heavy with the weight of this silent war. The 20th wedding anniversary was approaching like a train I could hear but couldn't see. Marcus threw himself into planning a massive party. He wanted it big, extravagant. He said he wanted to celebrate our milestone properly, his exact word milestone, spoken with a straight face and not a hint of irony. I sat across the dinner table and listened to him describe the venue, the caterer, the guest list, and I thought, "You're not celebrating a milestone. You're building a stage for my humiliation," because I knew the truth. He wanted to throw a grand, impressive party so he could parade Chloe in front of everyone. He wanted his boss, Mr. Henderson, a powerful, respected man whose approval Marcus craved like oxygen, to see him as a man of status, of means. And then in front of all those people, he was going to destroy me. He spent $60,000 on that party. $60,000 from our joint savings account. Money I had helped build penny by penny, year by year. $60,000 for a party whose sole purpose was to publicly divorce me and hand my life to another woman. And I let him spend it, every cent. I didn't object, I didn't flinch. I just watched him sign the checks, approve the caterers, choose the venue, a luxury ballroom in downtown Boston, all with a pleasant, agreeable smile on my face. Because every dollar he spent was another nail in his own coffin. He was draining our joint account, which meant less for him when the divorce he was planning actually went through. He just didn't realize it yet. The porcelain anniversary, 20 years, porcelain, a material that looks beautiful and strong but shatters the moment you drop it. How fitting. Finally, the day arrived, October 12th. It was a beautiful evening, the kind of crisp, golden autumn night that Boston does better than anywhere else in the world. But inside my chest, there was nothing golden. Just a cold knot of dread and anticipation, wound so tight I could barely breathe. The venue Marcus had chosen was stunning. A high-end ballroom in a luxury hotel in the heart of downtown. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. The tables were draped in white linen set with gleaming silverware. Flowers, enormous, lush arrangements of white roses and deep green ferns, adorned every surface. Soft golden lighting bathed the room in warmth. A live jazz band played in the corner, their music smooth and elegant, filling the air with the kind of sound that makes everything feel important. Hundreds of guests filled the ballroom. Friends, colleagues, family members, Marcus's boss, Mr. Henderson, the man Marcus practically worshipped, all of them dressed in their finest, smiling, laughing, clinking glasses of champagne. I wore an emerald green dress. I had bought it especially for tonight, choosing it carefully, knowing in my bones that it would be the last thing I ever wore as Marcus's wife. It was beautiful, elegant, the color of new beginnings. I put on my best smile. I greeted every guest warmly. I shook hands, accepted compliments, laughed at jokes. I played the part of the happy wife celebrating her milestone anniversary with the precision of an actress who had rehearsed her role for months, because that's exactly what I was. Marcus was beside me, looking smug and polished in his expensive suit, playing the doting husband like he'd invented the role. He smiled broadly, shook hands firmly, clapped people on the back. He even made a point of introducing me to Mr. Henderson, who took my hand warmly and said, 20 years, congratulations to you both, here's to many more. I smiled, I thanked him, and the irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I saw Chloe, of course, she was impossible to miss. She wore a stunning red dress, tight, low-cut, designed to be noticed. She stood near the front of the room next to Beatrice, who was beaming at her like a proud mother presenting her favorite daughter. The two of them whispered and laughed, their heads closed together, their eyes constantly drifting toward me with a look I can only describe as anticipatory cruelty. They were waiting, savoring what was coming. At one point, Chloe caught my eye. She held my gaze for a moment and then gave me a small, slow smirk. Triumphant, victorious, as if she had already won, I looked right back at her and I smiled. A calm, steady, knowing smile. The kind of smile that has no panic in it, no desperation, no defeat, just quiet certainty. It must have confused her because the smirk faltered just for a second, just a flicker before she turned back to Beatrice. Good, let her be confused. She had no idea what was coming. None of them did. Dinner was served and the evening hummed along beautifully. The food was exquisite, the wine flowed freely, the band played on. People laughed, told stories, raised toasts. From the outside, it looked like the perfect celebration. I ate slowly, mechanically, tasting nothing. My nerves were strung tight as piano wire, but I kept my hands steady, my expression pleasant. I kept glancing at Marcus, watching, waiting. I knew it was coming. I could feel it the way you feel a thunderstorm before the first crack of lightning, the air getting heavy, the pressure building, the whole world holding its breath. Around 9 o'clock, after dessert had been served and the last of the champagne glasses refilled, Marcus pushed back his chair. He straightened his tie, and then he stood up and walked slowly, deliberately, savoring the moment, toward the stage where the band was playing. He took the microphone, tapped it twice. The soft thud echoed through the ballroom. The music faded, conversations died, and one by one every face in that room turned to look at him. He started with the charm, of course he did, that was always his opening move. "My dear friends and family," he began, his voice smooth and warm and confident, the voice of a man who believed he was in complete control of the room. "Tonight marks a very special occasion, 20 years of marriage with my beautiful wife Evelyn." He looked at me, he gave a small, practiced smile. A few people clapped, someone said, "Hear, hear." My heart was pounding now, a deep heavy beat that I could feel in my temples, in my wrists, in the hollow of my throat. This was it. Then, like a switch being flipped, his voice changed. The warmth drained out of it, the charm evaporated. What replaced it was cold, hard, edged with something ugly. His smile twisted into a sneer. "But you know," he continued, his voice rising just enough to make everyone lean forward, 20 years is a long time. "And sometimes people change, they grow apart." He paused, let the words hang in the air like smoke. "And sometimes one person just becomes..." Another pause, longer this time, deliberate, boring. A gasp rippled through the crowd. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I saw Mr. Henderson's brow furrow, his expression shifting from polite attention to something darker. Marcus pointed at me, directly at me, his finger extended like a weapon. "Evelyn," he said, his voice loud and clear, bouncing off the walls of that beautiful ballroom, "you are a boring woman, you have become predictable, uninteresting, you have no passion, no ambition." He laughed, a short, cruel, mocking laugh that made my skin crawl. "I am tired of pretending, I am tired of this sham of a marriage." Silence, the kind of silence that has weight. The kind you can feel pressing against your eardrums. You could have heard a pin drop from across the room. People were looking back and forth between Marcus and me, their faces frozen in expressions of shock, disbelief, horror. Mouths hung open, forks were suspended mid-air. The band members exchanged uneasy glances, and there in the front row, Beatrice and Chloe sat side by side, glowing. Their faces were lit up with victory, with satisfaction so naked and shameless it turned my stomach. Chloe even brought her hands together in a single, quiet clap, a small, arrogant gesture like a queen acknowledging the fall of a rival. Marcus wasn't finished. He took a deep breath, actually savoring this like a man taking a bite of his favorite dessert, and continued. "So tonight," he announced, his voice ringing through that ballroom like a verdict, "in front of all our friends, all our family, and my esteemed boss, Mr. Henderson." He straightened his shoulders, lifted his chin. "I'm announcing my decision." Another pause, dramatic, theatrical, he was enjoying this. "I am divorcing you, Evelyn, and I want you out of my apartment by tomorrow morning." He let the words land like a slap. "I have already made arrangements. The apartment will be given to someone who appreciates me, someone who is vibrant and exciting." His eyes slid toward Chloe, just for a second, just long enough for everyone in the room to follow his gaze and understand exactly who he meant. The room erupted in murmurs, angry whispers, confused glances, a few people actually standing up as if to leave. My friends, the ones who had loved me for years, who had sat at my kitchen table and shared my coffee, looked devastated. Their mouths hung open, their eyes wide and wet with shock, but I stood there, still, calm. My face showed nothing, no tears, no trembling, no collapsed posture of a woman who had just been publicly gutted. Just quiet, unyielding. A calm so deep it probably scared him more than any scream ever could, because Marcus was expecting me to crumble. He was expecting the tears, the begging, the public breakdown, the boring woman dissolving into the pathetic puddle he had told Chloe I would become. That was the scene he had rehearsed in his head, the final act of his little play. But that woman, the woman who would have crumbled, was already gone. She had died months ago, alone in a dark bedroom, reading his phone by the glow of its screen. The woman standing in this ballroom was someone else entirely. I took a slow, deep breath. I let it fill my lungs completely, the way you do before you jump off a diving board, not because you're afraid, but because you want to feel every second of the fall. I looked at Marcus, then at Beatrice, then at Chloe. They looked so sure of themselves, so smug. 3 people sitting atop a plan they thought was flawless, admiring their handiwork like architects at a building dedication. I began to walk slowly, steadily, toward the stage. My emerald green dress rustled softly against my legs, the only sound in the entire ballroom. Every step felt deliberate, powerful, like I was walking towards something I'd been heading for my entire life. Marcus saw me coming. His expression shifted, first surprise, then annoyance. He didn't step aside. He thought I was coming to beg him, to plead, to whisper, to ask him to stop. That's what the boring woman would do, right? I reached the stage. Without a word, I extended my hand and gently, firmly took the microphone from his grip. He tried to pull it back. His fingers tightened, but I held on. My grip was calm, steady, immovable. "Evelyn, what are you doing?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous, meant only for me. I ignored him. I stepped forward, faced the crowd, and raised the microphone. My voice was clear, calm, strong. It didn't shake, not even a little. "Thank you, Marcus," I said into the microphone, and my voice carried to every corner of that glittering ballroom. "Thank you for that very illuminating speech." I paused, let the word sit, let it settle into every ear in the room. "You see, Marcus has just made a few rather shocking announcements tonight, and I feel it is only fair." I looked out at the sea of stunned faces, that I add a few details to his story. Behind me, Marcus's face was turning red, a deep mottled crimson that climbed from his collar to his hairline. "Evelyn, don't you dare," he whispered fiercely, his hand shooting out to grab the microphone. I held it tighter, pushed him back, gently, calmly, like you'd move a child's hand away from a hot stove. He stumbled just a step. But in front of everyone in that cavernous, silent room, it made him look exactly what he was, foolish. I swept my gaze across the crowd. I saw Mr. Henderson, his eyes narrowed, watching me with the sharp attention of a man who knows something important is about to happen. I saw my friends, their faces a mix of worry, confusion, and the faintest glimmer of hope. And I saw Beatrice and Chloe, their smug, victorious smiles slowly beginning to crack like porcelain under pressure as a dawning realization crept across their faces. "Marcus has just informed you all that he is divorcing me," I continued, my voice measured and steady, "and that he expects me to be out of his apartment by tomorrow morning." I made sure to emphasize the word his, let it hang there, let everyone hear it. However, I paused. The silence in that room was absolute. Not a cough, not a rustle, not a single breath out of place. Every person in that ballroom was leaning forward, suspended, hanging on each word like it was a lifeline. There's a small detail Marcus seems to have forgotten, or perhaps, I tilted my head slightly, conveniently ignored. The pause stretched. The tension was almost unbearable, and then I spoke. "The apartment, our apartment in Boston, the one Marcus just claimed as his own." I turned and looked directly at him. His face was a mask of shock and naked fury, his jaw tight, his eyes wide. "That apartment was gifted to me by my parents before we were married. It is 100% legally my property. Marcus," I let his name land like a gavel strike, "you have absolutely no right to it." I turned back to the crowd. "So, in fact, it is you, Marcus, who will be moving out of my apartment tomorrow morning." The gasp that went through that room was like a wave. A physical, audible wave of shock that rippled from the front row to the very back. Whispers erupted, loud, urgent, furious. People were turning to each other, eyes wide, mouths moving. Marcus stood frozen on the stage beside me, his mouth hanging open, his face completely drained of color. Beatrice had gone white, ghost white, her composure shattered like the porcelain this anniversary was named for. And Chloe looked furious. Her eyes were flashing, her jaw clenched, her triumphant smirk replaced by something feral and desperate. The whole dynamic of the room had flipped, in an instant, like a chessboard being overturned. "But wait," I said, raising a hand to quiet the murmurs. The room stilled. "There's more." Two of the most powerful words in the English language, "there's more." Marcus also mentioned that he has made arrangements for the apartment to be given to someone vibrant and exciting. I let those words drip with quiet irony, and I believe we all know who that someone is. I gestured subtly, almost casually, toward Chloe. She looked like she wanted the earth to open up and swallow her whole. Her face had gone from furious to terrified. The red dress that had looked so bold and confident an hour ago now seemed like a spotlight she couldn't escape. "What Marcus failed to mention," I continued, and now my voice grew colder, not louder, not angrier, just colder like steel, "is that in his efforts to impress this vibrant young woman, he has also secretly taken out over $55,000 in bank loans." Another gasp, louder this time. "Loans which he used to buy her expensive jewelry, lavish dinners, designer gifts. Gifts that I have photographs of right here on my phone." I held it up, waving it slightly, though no one could see the screen. It didn't matter. The effect was devastating. Along with his text messages, his own words, confessing his scheme with his mother, Beatrice, to humiliate me publicly and steal my home. The room was in chaos now. People were talking over each other. Someone dropped a glass. Mr. Henderson rose slowly to his feet, and the look on his face, the disgust, the cold, professional contempt, was something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. He looked at Marcus the way you look at something you've accidentally stepped in. Marcus was speechless. His mouth was open, but nothing came out. His eyes, those clever, calculating eyes, were wide and wild with terror. The grand plan, the beautiful, elaborate trap he had spent months constructing, was collapsing around him in real time, piece by piece by piece. And Beatrice was glaring at Marcus, not at me, at him. Her face was twisted with fury, and I could almost read her thoughts. "You fool, you incompetent fool, you ruined everything." "And finally," I said, the room went quiet again. The silence was different this time, anticipatory, electric, like the moment before a thunderclap. Marcus also hinted that I would be left with nothing, that he would take everything from me. I paused. A small, calm smile touched my lips. Well, I have one more little secret, one he doesn't know about. I could feel Marcus's eyes boring into the side of my face. I could hear his breathing, ragged, shallow, panicked. Just a few weeks ago, my uncle passed away and left me a rather substantial inheritance. I let the word land, $4 million in a Swiss bank account, the room inhaled. And a luxury beach house in Malibu, California. The room exploded. People were on their feet, shouting, gasping, exclaiming. Someone actually clapped. The noise was deafening, a wall of sound that crashed over the ballroom like a tidal wave. I saw faces I knew, friends, cousins, colleagues, transformed by disbelief, by joy, by vindication. And Marcus let out a sound I will never forget. It wasn't a word, it was a sound. A choked, strangled cry, halfway between a gasp and a moan, the sound of a man watching everything he thought he'd secured dissolve into smoke right before his eyes. His face went from red to ashen, a sickly, drained gray that made him look 10 years older in an instant. Chloe, oh Chloe, the moment she heard $4 million, the calculation behind those bright eyes became visible to everyone in the room. She wasn't looking at Marcus with love anymore. She was looking at him with horror. Because she had just realized in front of hundreds of people that she hadn't bet on a winner. She had bet on a fool with $55,000 in debt and no apartment to his name. And Beatrice looked like she had seen a ghost. The color had left her face entirely. She sat rigid in her chair, her hands gripping the armrests, staring at the stage as if she were watching her own funeral. So Marcus, I said, my voice ringing through that ballroom with a finality that felt almost sacred, you won't be taking anything from me. I looked at him, directly at him, into those eyes that had once made me feel like the most loved woman in the world and had spent the last 20 years slowly, systematically making me feel like the smallest. You will be leaving my apartment. You will be paying your $55,000 in debt all by yourself. And you will not be getting a single penny of my $4 million. I let a beat pass, just one. The boring woman, it seems, just became a very rich, very free woman. Another beat. And you, Marcus, you are left with nothing but your lies and your debts. He just stared at me. His mouth hung slightly open, like a marionette whose strings had been cut. The color had drained from his face completely, leaving behind a pasty, unhealthy gray, the color of a man who has just realized that the world as he understood it no longer exists. His eyes, usually so quick to flash with feigned warmth or calculating hunger, were now wide and unblinking, staring at me like I was a stranger, like I was someone he had never met before. And in a way, I was. The carefully constructed mask, the smooth, confident, untouchable Marcus, had utterly shattered. What was left underneath was small, pathetic, exposed. His body seemed to deflate, losing that arrogant posture he'd carried like a crown for 20 years. The expensive suit which moments ago had made him look powerful and important now just seemed to hang on him, a costume for a play that had just been cancelled. What are you talking about?" he finally stammered. His voice was a thin, reedy whisper, completely stripped of its usual authority. It was the voice of a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Not a man, not a husband, just a small, desperate person watching his own lies burn down around him. His eyes darted around the room, searching for an exit, an ally, anything that might make my words less real. He found nothing. Only hundreds of faces staring back at him with disgust, with pity, with the unmistakable look of people watching someone get exactly what they deserved. I took a slow, deep breath. Clean air, clear lungs, the first breath I'd taken in months that didn't feel poisoned by pretense. "You heard me, Marcus," I said. My voice was steady, not trembling with old hurt, not tight with swallowed anger. Just calm, factual. The voice of a woman who has nothing left to prove and no one left to impress. "It's over, all of it, the pretense, the lies, the financial drain. You are no longer welcome here. Your key no longer works. Your access to my life, to my resources, to me, is completely cut off." I watched his face contort. Something ugly flickered across his features, rage, humiliation, the desperate scramble of a con man whose marks have just walked out of the room. He tried to rearrange his expression into something resembling composure, but it was too late. Everyone had already seen the truth. He took a step toward me, his hand reaching out, and for one fleeting second, one tiny traitorous second, an old fear tried to surface. The fear of his anger, his raised voice, his ability to twist my words until I didn't trust my own thoughts. But I stood firm, arms crossed, expression unwavering, and something in my posture must have told him what he needed to know because he stopped short. His outstretched hand hovered in the air for a moment, then fell to his side. The old me was gone, and he could feel it. "Evelyn, honey," his voice shifted, softened, took on that sickly sweet, manipulative tone, the voice he used when he wanted something desperately. "You can't be serious. This is a joke, right? You're just upset. We can talk about this. We always talk things through, don't we? Remember the good times? Our plans?" I almost laughed, almost. "Our plans, Marcus." I repeated, and the words tasted like ash. "Your plans to drain me dry? Your plans to live off my hard work while you played at being a big shot?" My voice hardened, not into a shout, but into something harder than shouting. Into stone. There were no our plans that involved respect, or effort, or truth on your part. There were only your schemes. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of 20 years of unspoken truths. 20 years of swallowed words and strangled tears and quiet compromises that were never, ever reciprocated. He flinched, actually flinched as if I'd struck him. He tried a different angle. His face twisted into a wounded expression, wide eyes, furrowed brow, the practiced mask of a man who has always relied on looking hurt to deflect blame. "But Evelyn, darling," his voice cracked with theatrical emotion. "You know I love you. My whole life is with you. We built this together. This apartment, our future." He gestured around the room, this beautiful room I had furnished with my own money, decorated with my own taste, maintained with my own two hands while he contributed nothing but complaints about the cost. The hypocrisy was so staggering, so brazen that for a moment I just looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw him clearly, maybe for the first time in 20 years. "You built nothing, Marcus," I said flatly, each word precise, each word deliberate. "I paid for this apartment, I furnished it, I maintained it. You contributed nothing but debt, heartache, and empty promises." I held his gaze unflinching. "You say you love me? You loved what I could do for you. You loved what I owned, but you never loved me, the woman who worked herself to the bone to keep our life together while you pursued your dreams that never materialized." Each sentence landed like a clean surgical cut. No wasted words, no hysteria. Just truth delivered with the calm precision of someone who has had months to prepare and a lifetime of reasons to speak. His face flushed deep red, a mottled, ugly crimson, nothing like the composed blush of embarrassment. This was the color of a man whose armor had been ripped away, and for the first time a genuine flash of anger appeared in his eyes, not the performative kind, real anger, raw and exposed and ugly. "How dare you?" he hissed, his voice rising, dropping every pretense of gentleness. "After everything I've done for you, I supported you, I was there for you." "You were there for my bank account, Marcus," I corrected, my voice still level, still calm, like a lake that refuses to ripple no matter how many stones you throw into it. "And you know what? I'm done. I want you out now." He took a step back, then another. His eyes narrowed, scanning my face the way a burglar checks windows, looking for a crack, a weakness, any way in. He found none. The woman standing before him was not the woman he had spent 20 years diminishing. This woman had found her voice, her strength, her freedom, and he could see it, he must have seen it, because something in his posture changed. His shoulders slumped, the bravado drained out of him like water from a cracked glass. "Fine," he snarled, low, guttural, the last sound of a cornered animal. "Fine, if that's how you want it, Evelyn, but don't come crawling back when you realize what you've lost. Don't come crying to me when you're lonely and old and regret this." One last sting, one final, desperate attempt to plant a seed of doubt. It bounced off me like a pebble off a stone wall. I looked at him, and a small, quiet smile, not bitter, not triumphant, just peaceful, settled on my lips. "I won't, Marcus, I won't be lonely, and I certainly won't regret choosing myself. I will be free, and I will finally have peace." He turned abruptly, no goodbye, no backward glance. He stomped toward the front door, his heavy footsteps echoing too loudly in the sudden quiet of the apartment. He didn't gather his things. He didn't reach for a suitcase or a coat. He just grabbed his car keys from the small bowl on the entryway table and flung the door open with so much force it cracked against the wall. He paused, one hand on the doorknob. He looked back at me over his shoulder, and his eyes, red-rimmed, blazing, full of a hatred so pure it was almost clarifying, met mine one last time. "You'll be sorry," he growled. I met his gaze, steady, unblinking, the way you look at a storm that has already passed. "No, Marcus," I said, "I don't think I will." The door slammed shut. The sound reverberated through the apartment, through the walls, through the floor, through my bones, a loud, final punctuation mark on 20 years of my life. The latch clicked into place with a definitive metallic snap. And then, silence, but it wasn't an empty silence, not the cold, hollow quiet of an abandoned room. No, this was something else entirely. It was profound, almost spiritual. Thick and heavy, yes, but in the way a warm blanket is heavy when you pull it over yourself on a winter night. It wrapped around me, settling into every corner of the apartment, filling the spaces his voice had once dominated. The air itself seemed to lighten, as if some great, invisible weight had been lifted from the very walls. I could hear things I hadn't heard in years. The dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunbeams that poured through the living room windows. I swear I could almost hear them, tiny and silent, their lazy spiral a celebration of the new calm. The grandfather clock in the hallway, the antique one Marcus had always complained about, too loud, annoying, get rid of it, now ticked softly, steadily, like a gentle heartbeat. Like the apartment itself was breathing for the first time. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant murmur of traffic from far below. Sounds I'd forgotten existed, buried for years under the constant noise of his demands, his moods, his drama. They were all there now, clear, crisp, free, as if my ears too had been liberated. It was the kind of silence that lets you hear your own breathing, slow, even, the tangible sound of peace. It was the silence of a battle won, a storm past, a new dawn breaking over a tranquil, sunlit sea. It was the silence of freedom, and it was simply beautiful. I stood there for a long time. 5 minutes, maybe 10, maybe longer, just breathing. The tension that had been living in my shoulders, my neck, my jaw, tension I'd carried so long I'd forgotten it was there, like a weight you stop noticing because it becomes part of your skeleton, began to melt. I could feel it draining out of me, seeping downward through my body and into the polished hardwood floor beneath my feet. My back muscles unclenched, one by one, releasing their perpetual readiness for the next argument, the next cutting remark, the next carefully disguised attack. My hands, I looked down and realized they had been clenched into fists. I hadn't even noticed. Slowly, I unfurled them, stretching my fingers wide, feeling the cool air move between them. Such a small thing, such a freeing thing. A sigh escaped my lips, not a sigh of sadness, not regret. It was a sigh that had been building for 20 years, a single long exhale that carried with it every swallowed frustration, every bitten back response, every tear I'd cried alone in the bathroom with the faucet running so he wouldn't hear. I breathed it all out and I let it go. Slowly, deliberately, I walked to the front door, not to open it, just to touch it. My hand reached out and my fingertips met the smooth, cool wood. I ran them along the sturdy frame, feeling every grain, every subtle ridge. It was a gesture that felt both symbolic and deeply, achingly personal. This door, this ordinary, everyday door, had been a portal for 20 years. His comings and goings, his grand pronouncements, his petty complaints, his late-night arrivals smelling of someone else's perfume. Now it was simply a boundary, a wall, a barrier protecting my new life. I thought about the key he'd grabbed on his way out, probably still clenched in his angry fist. It didn't matter. I would change the locks first thing in the morning, a practical step, a necessary one, the final seal on a door that would never open for him again. I walked back into the living room, and with each step I felt lighter, physically lighter, as if gravity itself had loosened its grip on me. The afternoon sun, the same sun that had risen over 1,000 days of Marcus's shadow, now seemed to sparkle. It lit up the dust in the air like tiny, hopeful stars, transforming the ordinary into something almost magical. My gaze fell on the sofa, the same sofa where I had sat so many times, nodding along to his latest complaint, his newest scheme, feeling my spirit erode a little more with each conversation. It looked different now. It looked like my sofa in my apartment, a place for my rest, my comfort. I settled into the armchair, my favorite one. The one Marcus had always dismissed as too old-fashioned and not comfortable enough for guests. I sank into its plush cushions and felt them fold around me like an embrace from an old friend. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't brace myself. There was no internal alarm bell, no knot in my stomach, no subconscious countdown to the next eruption, just stillness, just peace. A peace so deep and so unfamiliar it almost made me cry. Almost, but not quite. I was done crying for Marcus. My mind, usually a storm of worries, money, his mood, what to say, what not to say, how to keep the peace, how to make him happy, was remarkably, wonderfully clear. Like a lake after a long, brutal storm, its surface finally still, reflecting nothing but open sky. I began to think, not about what I had lost, but about what I had gained. $4 million, I whispered to myself. The words felt surreal, impossible. Like something spoken in a dream, but it wasn't just the money, though God knows the money mattered. It was the freedom that came with it. Freedom from financial anxiety, freedom from manipulation, freedom from the cage of someone else's lies. What would I do first? The question hummed in my mind, a bright, exhilarating buzz, so different from the anxious static that had filled my thoughts for so long. The possibilities stretched out before me like a vast, golden horizon. I thought about the small things first. The new gardening tools I'd been eyeing for months but never bought because Marcus would call it an unnecessary expense. The chipped coffee mugs I'd been too guilt-ridden to replace, repainting the bedroom a soft, calming shade of blue, a color I'd always loved but he'd always vetoed, insisting on a dull, lifeless beige because it's more practical. Small things, tiny things, but they were my things, chosen freely, for my joy. And beyond the small things, bigger dreams began to surface, rising up from the deep place where I'd buried them years ago, pushing their way toward the light like flowers through cracked pavement. I had always wanted to travel. Marcus had always dismissed it. Too expensive, too much hassle. He'd rather spend the money on whatever he wanted, but now there was nothing stopping me. I pictured myself standing on a windswept cliff above the Irish Sea, the salt wind tangling my hair. Wandering through the vibrant, chaotic markets of Morocco, sitting at a tiny table in a Parisian cafe sipping coffee, watching the world go by with absolutely nowhere I needed to be. The images were so vivid, so alive, they made my heart ache in the best possible way. And then there was family. My sister Clara, who had always worried about me, who had tried, gently and persistently, to warn me about Marcus when everyone else was too polite to say a word. My niece Lily, saving every penny she had for college. I could help them, not just with money, but with the peace of mind that comes from knowing that the person you love is truly, genuinely happy. I could finally be the person I'd always wanted to be for them, not someone weighed down by another person's selfishness, but someone free. A soft knock on the door pulled me out of my thoughts. My heart gave a little jump, an old reflex, a leftover tremor from Marcus's world where every unexpected sound carried the potential for confrontation. But then I remembered. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. My dear friend Evelyn was coming over. I'd called her earlier, right after the lawyer's visit, and given her the highlights in a breathless, barely contained rush, promising to tell her everything over a cup of tea. I walked to the door, and as I reached for the handle, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the hallway mirror. I was smiling. A real smile, not the careful, calibrated smile I'd worn like makeup for 20 years. A genuine, unguarded from the soul smile, and I realized, with a pang that was equal parts joy and sorrow, that it was the first one I'd worn in years. I opened the door. There was Evelyn, kind eyes twinkling behind her glasses. A small bouquet of wildflowers, daisies mostly, clutched in one hand, her favorite purple scarf wrapped around her neck, a cheerful splash of color against her sensible gray coat. She took one look at me and her face lit up. "Me, darling," she exclaimed, her voice warm and full. "You look radiant, is it true? Is he really gone?" I pulled her into a hug. A tight, full body, hold on for dear life hug. I breathed in the familiar scent of her lavender perfume, and something inside me released a final knot, a last held breath. "Yes, Ev," I whispered into her shoulder. "He's gone for good this time." We spent the next 3 hours at my kitchen table, herbal tea in our favorite mismatched mugs, Evelyn's homemade shortbread between us, buttery, crumbly, perfect, and I told her everything. From the beginning, every detail, every discovery, every carefully planned step. Evelyn listened the way only a true friend listens, with her whole body, her whole heart. Her expression shifted as the story unfolded. Concern when I described the late-night phone call, indignation when I read her the texts from Beatrice, and triumphant, fierce joy when I described the moment I took that microphone. She nodded at exactly the right moments. Her hand reached across the table periodically to squeeze mine, no words needed, just the solid, reassuring pressure of someone who is with you. When I finished, she had tears in her eyes. "Oh, me," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "my brave, wonderful me. I always knew you had it in you. He was a leech, a parasite. I'm so glad you finally saw it clearly." I laughed, a light, genuine laugh that sounded strange and beautiful in my own kitchen, like a bird that had forgotten it knew how to sing. "It took a $4 million wake-up call, didn't it?" "Sometimes that's what it takes," Evelyn replied, smiling through her tears. "But now you're free. What's next?" I told her about the travel dreams, about Clara and Lily, about wanting to invest wisely to build something lasting and meaningful. Her eyes shone with excitement, real excitement, the kind that has no envy in it, no hidden edge. She was sharing in my joy as if it were her own. That's what a true friend does. They don't measure your happiness against theirs, they just celebrate. As the evening deepened, the apartment felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. Not just with our voices and our laughter, but with a new energy, warm, buzzing, hopeful. It felt like a home again, not a stage for someone else's ego. A home. Evelyn left around 8 o'clock, wrapping me in one last hug at the door, promising to call first thing in the morning. I watched her walk down the hallway, her purple scarf bouncing with each step, and I closed the door behind her with a click that felt like punctuation. The good kind. The next morning I was up with the sun. I called a locksmith at 8 o'clock sharp. He arrived within the hour, a kind, quiet man who worked quickly and efficiently. It took him 20 minutes to replace the old lock with a new one. When he tested it, turning the key, hearing the smooth, decisive click of the new mechanism engaging, I felt a surge of satisfaction so deep it made my chest tight. That chapter was closed, literally and figuratively. The door that had once opened so freely for Marcus now answered only to me. I also spent that morning doing something that felt both painful and necessary. I blocked Marcus from everything. Phone, email, social media. Every digital thread that still connected us, snip, 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 gone. There was a pang as I did it. A fleeting, ghost-like sadness, not for him exactly, but for the man I'd once believed he was. For the version of Marcus who used to bring me wildflowers and hold my hand at the grocery store. That man had never really existed, I knew that now. But letting go of the illusion still stung, the way pulling off a bandage stings even when the wound underneath has already healed. I pushed through it, blocked, deleted, done, because I knew Marcus, he wouldn't go quietly. He was a man who confused persistence with love and control with partnership, and when money was involved, he would be relentless. I was right. The siege began that very afternoon. My phone, blissfully silent for hours, suddenly vibrated against the kitchen counter, an unknown number. My stomach tightened, a brief, involuntary clench, the body's old habit of bracing for impact, but I let it ring. Let it roll to voicemail. A few minutes later, another call, a different number, blocked, then another, and another. For the better part of an hour, my phone buzzed and chirped and lit up with calls from numbers I didn't recognize, a relentless, desperate barrage like someone throwing themselves against a locked door again and again and again. I blocked each one calmly, methodically. Each blocked number felt like a small, quiet victory, a brick in the wall I was building around my new life. Then came the texts. They arrived from a number I hadn't blocked yet, and they followed a pattern so predictable it was almost sad. 4:15 p.m., me please, we need to talk. This is crazy, you're being impulsive. 4:17 p.m., think about everything we had, don't throw it all away. 4:20 p.m., I know you're hurting, I am too, let's fix this. 4:25 p.m., this isn't like you, you're a kind, sensible woman, don't let this money change you. Each message was a masterpiece of manipulation. Concern wrapped around guilt, wrapped around blame, wrapped around the unspoken accusation. This is your fault for not being the woman I needed you to be, but I was immune now. The vaccine was truth and I'd had a full dose. I blocked the number, no reply, not a single word. Silence was my answer and it was louder than anything I could have typed. The messages escalated over the next 24 hours. The mask slipped further with each one. Next morning, 9:00 a.m. new number. Me, pick up the phone, I know you're there, you can't just ignore me. 9:05 a.m. Do you know how much I did for you? I sacrificed so much. This was a blatant, breathtaking lie, but so typical of Marcus that I almost felt a grim admiration for his consistency. 9:15 a.m. You're making a huge mistake. You'll regret this when you're alone. 9:30 a.m.? Are you seriously going to let a bit of money turn you into this cold, heartless person? I never thought you were like this. There it was, the shame card, the you've changed card, the weapon of every manipulator who realizes they've lost control. Rewrite the narrative, make her the villain, make her the one who broke something beautiful. I kept blocking. Each tap of my finger was a tiny declaration of independence. I could almost picture him on the other end, pacing, sweating, composing message after message, sending them into the void, waiting for a response that would never come. The frantic scratching of a man trying to claw his way back into a cage he'd never appreciated until the door was locked. Then came the emails. He found ways around my filters using new addresses, different providers. Email 1 subject, urgent, let's talk. Me, please, I need to discuss our future. There are things you don't understand. This isn't fair to me. Email 2 subject, my lawyer will contact you. You're making a legal error. This inheritance is joint property, or at least I have a claim. You can't just cut me out. This one almost made me laugh out loud. Joint property, the sheer audacity, the will was ironclad. My lawyers had confirmed it 6 ways from Sunday. This was pure bluster, the legal equivalent of a child holding up a toy badge and shouting, I'm a real policeman. Email 3 subject, you've changed. The me I knew would never treat someone like this. You've become greedy and selfish. And for what? So you can be alone with your millions? I forwarded every email to my lawyer just in case. But I knew Marcus had no leg to stand on. He was firing blanks and the echo of each one just made the silence from my end louder. The most disturbing moment came on the 3rd day. I was in the kitchen making coffee, the French press kind, the kind Marcus always said took too long, the kind I now had all the time in the world to enjoy. The apartment was quiet, peaceful, sunlight pooled on the countertop. And then bang, 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 not a knock, a pounding, aggressive, rhythmic, hard enough to rattle the doorframe to make the pictures on the wall tremble. My heart shot into my throat. A cold, familiar fear gripped my chest, the old fear, the one that had lived in my body for so long it had its own room. I stood frozen for 1 second, too, my hands wrapped around the edge of the counter. Then I moved. I walked to the door, slowly, deliberately. I pressed my eye to the peephole. There he was, Marcus. He was unrecognizable. His face was contorted with rage. His hair, usually slicked back with the careful precision of a man who cared deeply about appearances, was disheveled, wild. His eyes were bloodshot, darting. He was wearing the same suit from 3 days ago, rumpled and slept in, the collar crushed, the tie hanging loose. He looked like something that had crawled out of the wreckage of its own choices. His fist hit the door again. Bang, the peephole vibrated. I could hear his voice through the door, muffled by the thick, soundproofed wood, but I could make out the tone. Desperate, unhinged. Me, I know you're in there. Open this door, we need to talk. You can't do this to me, you owe me. I didn't flinch, I didn't open the door, I didn't say a word. Instead, I picked up my phone and with steady fingers, steady, despite the tremor still lurking somewhere beneath my skin, I called building security. Yes, hello. This is apartment 15B. I have an unauthorized person, Marcus Thorne, pounding on my door and refusing to leave. He is a former partner. I need him removed immediately. Through the door, I heard Marcus go quiet. He'd heard my voice. His pounding stopped. I could almost feel him pressing his ear against the wood. Me. His voice was hoarse now, cracking. Open this door. We need to talk. You can't do this to me. You owe me. I said nothing. I watched through the peephole and waited. Less than 2 minutes. That's all it took. Footsteps in the hallway. 2 security guards appeared, Mr. Jenkins and Ms. Rodriguez, their faces set, professional and grim. They knew me. I'd been a quiet, respectful resident for 20 years. Marcus was the stranger here now. Mr. Thorne, Mr. Jenkins's voice was firm, no room for negotiation. You are causing a disturbance. Mrs. Peterson has requested your immediate removal from the premises. Marcus spun around, his eyes blazing, a cornered animal. This is a private matter, you can't interfere. She's my fiancée? Ms. Rodriguez didn't blink. That's not what Mrs. Peterson has stated. You are to leave now or we will escort you out and you will be permanently banned from the building. He looked from the guards to my door and back again, his face crumpled. The rage dissolved into something small and desperate and pathetic. For one moment, just one, he looked like a man who had finally realized what he'd lost. You can't let her do this? His voice cracked into a wail. She's stolen everything from me, Mr. Thorne. Mr. Jenkins's hand rested on his walkie-talkie. You have 10 seconds. Marcus stared at my door one last time, a long, venomous look that I felt even through the peephole, even through inches of wood and steel. Then he turned and stalked down the hallway, muttering curses, his footsteps heavy and hollow. The security guards followed him. I waited until I heard the elevator doors close, until the voices faded into nothing. Until the hallway was silent again. Only then did I step back from the peephole. My heart was still pounding, a deep, heavy drumbeat against my ribs, but the fear was different now. It was smaller, quieter, overmatched by something far more powerful, relief, and the ironclad certainty that I had made the right choice. After that day, something shifted inside me. The last tremor of doubt went still. The fear was still there, a faint whisper in my subconscious, the ghost of old habits. But it was no longer in charge. It had been replaced by something fiercer, self-respect, determination, the kind of strength that doesn't shout but stands firm like bedrock. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building. First, I opened a new bank account, separate, clean, completely disconnected from anything Marcus had ever touched. Walking into that bank, sitting across from the account manager, signing my name on fresh paperwork, it felt monumental. Like planting a flag on new land. This is mine. This territory is mine. I met with a financial advisor recommended by my lawyer, a warm, patient woman named Ms. Chen who walked me through investment strategies, retirement planning, and charitable giving with the kind of gentle thoroughness that made me feel capable, not overwhelmed. We built a plan together, diversified investments, secure funds, moderate growth portfolios, and tucked in carefully like a secret garden, a fund dedicated entirely to my travel dreams. For the first time in my life, money felt like a tool for joy, not a weapon, not a chain, a tool. I reached out to Clara. We met at a small cafe near her office, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and hand-lettered chalkboard menus and the warm, yeasty smell of fresh-baked pastries. She arrived looking tired, so tired, the stress of her job and raising Lily alone etched into every line on her face. She was only 43, but she looked older, the way people look when they've been carrying too much for too long. Over lattes and awkward, wonderful silence, I told her everything. The phone call at 2 a.m., the texts, the party, the microphone. Her eyes grew wider with each revelation. Her mouth opened and closed and opened again. I can't believe it, she whispered. Marcus was always such a snake, but $4 million and he wanted to take it all? He tried, Clara, he really truly tried, but not anymore. I told him where to go and he's gone. She shook her head, stunned. And then I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw what I'd been too consumed by my own crisis to fully notice before. The circles under her eyes, the careful way she'd ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, the slight tremor in her hands as she held her cup. Clara, I said softly, I want to help you. She started to shake her head. Me, you don't have to. I want to pay off your mortgage. She froze. I want to set up a college fund for Lily, full tuition, whatever school she dreams of. Clara's hand went to her mouth. And I want you to take a vacation, a real one, the kind where you don't check your email and you sleep past 7 and you come back looking like yourself again. The tears came then, not mine, hers. They spilled down her cheeks like rain, catching the light from the cafe window, shining like tiny diamonds. She tried to speak, but for a moment there was nothing, just her chest heaving and her fingers gripping my hand so tightly I could feel her pulse. Me, she finally managed, her voice broken and beautiful. Thank you, thank you. I squeezed her hand back. You've always been there for me, Clara, even when I was too blind to see what was right in front of my face. You tried to warn me and I didn't listen and you stayed anyway, you stayed. My own voice wavered just a little. This isn't charity, this is family, and it's what freedom means to me, the ability to help the people I love without asking anyone's permission. She broke down completely then, sobbing into her latte napkin, and I sat there holding her hand, crying a little too, and it was the most beautiful, most real thing I had felt in 20 years. More real than any anniversary party. More real than any microphone speech. Just two sisters in a small cafe, finally able to breathe. Over the following weeks, life began to settle into something I barely recognized, a rhythm that was mine. Marcus's attempts to reach me dwindled. A stray text from an unknown number, an email that slipped through the spam filter. Each one was dealt with quickly, blocked, deleted, forgot. His shadow was shrinking, receding like a storm that has finally exhausted itself, leaving behind clear skies and the sharp, clean smell of rain. And in the space he left behind, I began to fill my life. I enrolled in evening art history classes, something I had dreamed about for years but had never pursued because Marcus had called it a waste of time. I joined a book club. I reconnected with old friends I'd slowly drifted away from, friends Marcus had dismissed as boring or not worth our time. They welcomed me back with open arms and warm, knowing looks that said, "We were waiting for you." I started laughing again, really laughing. The kind of laugh that starts deep in your belly and rolls up through your chest and bursts out of your mouth before you can stop it. A sound so foreign and so natural at the same time that the first time it happened, I stood in my kitchen and pressed my hand to my chest and thought, oh, there you are, I missed you. My apartment, my beautiful, sun-filled mine apartment was transformed. Not by expensive renovations or designer furniture, by life, music playing from the kitchen speakers while I cooked, the smell of bread baking in the oven. The sound of friends' voices filling the rooms, their laughter bouncing off the walls, soaking into the corners where tension and silence had lived for so long. This was home. This was what it had always been meant to be. Then, about 2 months after Marcus left, it happened. I was sitting on my balcony on a late afternoon, a cup of tea warming my hands, the sun on my face, a gentle breeze moving through my hair. The city spread out below me, golden and alive, and I felt for the first time that I was truly part of it. Not watching from behind glass, not trapped in someone else's version of my life. In it, fully, completely, peacefully in it, my phone chimed, an email from Mr. Davies, my lawyer. Subject, Marcus Thorne, final update. My heart fluttered, just once, just briefly, the ghost of an old anxiety passing through. I opened it. Dear Mrs. Peterson, I am writing to inform you that we have received notification from Marcus Thorne's legal representation. After thoroughly reviewing the details of your inheritance and our responses to his initial inquiries, Mr. Thorne has formally dropped all attempts to pursue a claim against your assets. He has acknowledged that he has no legal standing and will cease all further contact. This matter is now legally closed. Please find attached a formal cessation of claims document for your records. Congratulations on your freedom and peace of mind. I read the last line twice. Congratulations on your freedom and peace of mind. A wave of relief hit me, not a wave, a flood, so deep, so overwhelming that it reached places inside me I didn't know were still hurting. Tears came sudden and unstoppable, but they weren't tears of pain, they were tears of release. The kind that come when a fight you thought might last forever is suddenly, officially over. It wasn't just over, it was done. No more threats, no more lurking shadows, no more what-ifs keeping me up at 3 a.m. He was out, completely, permanently, legally, gone. I leaned back in my chair, the email still glowing on my phone screen, and I looked out at the world. The sky was a deep, brilliant blue, the kind of blue that seems to go on forever, the kind that makes you feel small and infinite at the same time. Cotton white clouds drifted lazily across it in no hurry to be anywhere. The sounds of the city floated up to me, distant sirens, the chatter of people on the sidewalk below, the muffled honking of horns, and they didn't feel chaotic anymore. They felt like music. The messy, beautiful, alive symphony of a world I was finally truly part of, on my own terms. The boring woman. I almost laughed thinking about those words now. The words he'd spit into that microphone like they were the worst insult he could think of. Like being steady and kind and patient and loyal was something to be ashamed of. I wasn't boring. I was resilient. I wasn't weak. I was strong. I wasn't trapped. I was free. And I was rich not just in money, though $4 million and a beach house in Malibu certainly didn't hurt. I was rich in spirit, in possibility, in peace. In the hard-won knowledge that I was worth more, infinitely, immeasurably more than what any man or his mother or his mistress would ever have the capacity to understand. It had taken 20 years, a lifetime of quiet suffering, and one massive inheritance to light the fuse, but I had finally found my voice, my strength, my absolute, unshakable refusal to be anything less than the woman I was always meant to be, and it felt wonderful. So if you're out there right now listening to this, sitting in the dark, feeling small, feeling unseen, feeling like you're fighting every day just to be valued, I want you to hear me. Hear me like I'm sitting right across from you, like we're at my kitchen table and the tea is hot and the world outside doesn't matter for a little while. Your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. Sometimes the biggest battles aren't fought with lawyers or microphones or $4 million. They're fought inside, in that quiet, private place where you decide once and for all that you are done shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's small, selfish world. You deserve respect. You deserve joy. You deserve peace. Don't you ever settle for less. Thank you for joining me for Nunny Stories. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more tales of resilience and unexpected turns.